Hello, this is an Ibach baby grand piano, 154 centimeters. That's about 5 foot 1 inches long. Coming to stock a couple of weeks ago. We're just finishing off the refining. We've done quite a lot of regulation, restoration work on it, but very grateful to get this piano in. Of all the small grand piano makers, I rate Ibach as one of the very, very best, and have quite innovative design and very sensible, thought out design. Just zeroing in on one of the key tops here, which isn't actually ivory, it's ivory look-alike, so we'll be replacing that one, but otherwise the ivory is in perfect condition. Now the casework's in extremely good condition, apart from this side, as you can see, is faded, but the rest of the piano polish is excellent, except for one patch on the top here that we couldn't completely eradicate, but that's already folded back, so you wouldn't notice that. We'd love to repolish the piano, but we also try and get pianos in that are very high quality instruments and won't cost quite so much. So for a small grand piano, I can highly recommend this one. Just to look at the pedals, they are lower. They're like Bechstein pedals I mentioned before in other videos. The Bechstein are very low pedals. These are actually lower than Bechstein, I think, so probably about 4 centimeters off the floor. That does mean that you can raise up the casters if you would like to have the piano a bit higher if you're very tall, so that's useful. As you can see, the gate legs, that's also tells us the kind of period the Ibach pianos is from. We didn't have a serial number on this, but there's a date inside of 1918. I think that's probably about correct. As we've mentioned many times before, one of the key things we're looking for is whether the tuning pins are tight, as to whether we will fully restore or recondition. The tuning pins on this are very tight. And in fact, it was 16 beats below concert pitch, which is probably about 40 years not been tuned, but it was almost in tune with itself, maybe 50 years even. So it's not been used a huge amount. It was originally used quite a lot, but then been sat doing not much. So we had to pitch raise this. This is now just above concert pitch to allow it to fall down slightly. We like to leave them about 442 because they tend to drop slightly when they get delivered to the client's house. This is in extremely good condition. The soundboard is perfect. I can't see any lines on it at all, so that's encouraging. And there's the Ibach logo underneath the strings. Now I don't know if you noticed on the strings here something unusual, which some very small grand piano makers did do, and Ibach, I believe, is the best asset. What we call double overstrung. So we have overstrung, as you can see, if you look, the strings crossing over each other is what we call overstrung. And then on top, the bottom bass notes are on top of that. So it gives a much better bass. It's a beautifully clear, rich middle tone as well. And then listening to the bass, there's the bottom one of those. And then what's a good match that is. It shows a very, very capable piano manufacturer, and listen to the bottom bass there. If we compare that with another grand piano of similar length, if you can keep that in mind. This is a Bluthner Star 4, same length of piano, 150 centimeters, and also has a good bass, but I think we're going to see that the Ibach is a bit richer. Back to the Ibach. It's a different sort of tone, really. It's a very interesting tone. Both pianos are excellent, really. The Bluthner is one that we're sourcing more of because it's more common. So it's nice to find this one. Something slightly different. Equal quality, though. I'd add extra dampers in the treble. Just 2 extra dampers here. There's several signs that show it's a high quality manufacturer. One thing all technicians love to see is when the wing nut, which holds the cheeks in, you take these out to get the action out, doesn't fall out. It's stayed there, and it's just a little bit extra work to keep it from falling out, to make a kind of system of keeping it on. But it's things like this that show that the manufacturer's thinking about the technician. So many other features. By the way, the action is interesting. We'll have a look at that. Now, Ibach have sloped the keys down slightly here, and if you can see the slope there, they've made the body slightly thinner, Also, actually, the piano is about 4 centimeters lower than most grand pianos, so just a nice, tasteful design, really. Just a quick look at some of the action work we've been doing, regulating the hammer height. That's the capstan down underneath. I don't know if I can get the video down that far. Just about. You can see one capstan here. Sorry about that. And then the set off here, and the drop screw, and the spring. So let's just see if the spring works well. It's going up not quite as strongly as we'd like it to, and the last thing will be to do the back checks to get them so that they're the right height, about 2/3 of the way up the check, I would say. This is the back check here. And we've refaced the hammers. We decided not to change them. They had a very nice tone, so it's got the original hammers. They have been used a lot initially, and as I say, the piano's not been used for a long time. Also, one reason we didn't change hammers, shanks and rollers is because these are very tight, the pins, surprisingly, just very well manufactured, really, and the roller is very smooth. It feels very smooth, so normally we'd often think about changing rollers, hammer shanks and rollers. Obviously going to put the price up a lot, but these actually function very well. I don't really think it would be improved a lot by doing that. So that's a bit unusual, but it's just because the piano is so well made in the first place. Technicians, you might be interested to see these beautiful adjustment screws for the spring, and also the way that these hinges are mounted horizontally and not vertically as they normally would be. So that's a Ibach baby grand piano, 5'1" long, in stock a couple of weeks ago, and we've just been refining it. It was very, very flat, so the implication, as it was in tune but flat, so that it had tight tuning pins, but just hadn't been tuned for, I would think, about 50 years, and it has a reasonable amount of playing before that. About 1918, we can't be sure of the date, but there is a 1918 written on one of the keys. Someone's written that on, so it's about right for the style of piano with the gate legs. Bechstein made a lot of gate leg pianos in that sort of era and slightly earlier. Beautiful clear tone. Touch about 50 grams. Just got a bit of refinement work to do still. A bit of action refinement generally. But really, one of the very best baby grand pianos you can get. Very tight tuning pins. We've got a 5-year guarantee, and can absolutely reassure you that the piano will perform perfectly. Obviously, you mustn't dry any piano out, modern or old, so you have to be careful with that. That's the main enemy. Underfloor heating, for instance, you have to be very careful, and we'd like to see the room, really, ideally, if it's got underfloor heating, and just to make sure that everything's fine. But ordinary central heating you won't have a problem with. Beautifully rich bass with a double overstringing. Thank you very much for listening.